Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much, as always, for taking the time to tune in. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Jeff Siegel, who is a men's wellness coach who's here to discuss his journey to empowering men to take better care of themselves through mindfulness, movement, and healthy lifestyles using social support. And I emphasise that part because that's going to be part of our conversation a little bit later. Today, Jeff takes a whole person approach to wellness, believing that physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health cannot be separated. And Jeff has been working in the wellness space for years, but his journey into health and healing started much earlier when he suffered from an eating disorder as a teenager, which we'll get to here quite shortly. Through this very difficult journey, he was driven to learn all that he could about creating a healthy mind-body relationship. Jeff freely offers that he is way over-educated, and I do want to touch on that today because we had a bit of a laugh about that when we were prior to recording. The first time we had a chance to meet, and holding a master's in Buddhism from the University of Hong Kong and a master's in mind and brain education from Harvard University, no less. Jeff, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Yeah, Gary, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for hosting me.
Good man, good man. So as I mentioned there, your journey into health and healing began with your own traumatic experience, overcoming an eating disorder in your teens. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that, and specifically, how has this personal journey influenced your approach to creating the healthy mind-body relationship?
Hmm. So eating disorders, especially among men, is something that's not typically talked about.
Yeah.
Um, and for a reason, right? Like it's far less common among men than it is for women. Yet I still think, there are thousands, if not millions of men that have eating disorders or suffer from some sort of disordered eating, if you think of it as a continuum. Uh, and there's a lot of challenges that come up, right? And so for me, I was a teenager. There was going through puberty, right? Entering high school. My older brother had left to go to university. My father's, work had kind of started to take off and he was very busy, right? So I kind of lost a lot of the men in my life. Hormones were raging, right? Coming into kind of my own sexuality, trying to understand like, what does it mean to have sexual desire? What do I do with this? Uh, and the world seemed big at that point and overwhelming. And like there was all these expectations now upon me to do well in school and to be attractive to women, and to look a certain way and to act a certain way and to be cool, right? I mean, all of the things that make adolescence such a fun and confusing time. And I fell into, a pattern of using food as a coping tool, right? And you could say a maladaptive one, right? Which started initially as just kind of skipping some meals here and there, but it really began to just take on a life of its own. And look, an anorexic is in many ways like the perfect dieter, right? I was able to use sheer willpower to just overcome any sort of hunger I had, right? And I could go hours or days without eating or just eating so little. Um, and it got to the point where I had lost so much weight that my health was really in jeopardy. I had to drop out of high school. I was very fortunate that my parents, my family were supportive and had some resources to send me to see a dietitian, to see a therapist. Ultimately, I had to go into a hospital program and really pull myself out of a very, very dark, sad place, a place that I don't wish anybody ever has to go to. And yet I see a lot of guys, maybe not at rock bottom, but, just dealing with the daily frustrations of being unhappy in their body or continuing certain eating habits over and over and over that they know is not serving them. And it creates this vicious cycle, right? Where it's like you feel bad in your body and then you eat something to feel better and then you end up feeling even worse, right? Or the opposite, so there's so many ways in which, our relationship to food can go awry. And that's something that I really, obviously my personal journey, and trying to kind of build myself back up to a place of health, right, is like allowed me to see that my struggle with disordered eating, right, like taught me the importance of understanding this why. Why was I eating or not eating, right? It really just, it wasn't about food. It wasn't about calories, right? It was about emotions. It was about social expectations. It was about all these cultural factors, of what does it mean to look a certain way or to be a certain type of guy. It was about my family's system, right? So this really kind of inspired this systems perspective on eating, trying to really understand that there's so many elements that go into play. When we're changing our eating habits, it's not just about eating kale and broccoli or chicken or whatever. It's right. It's really a matter of identity, and you have to look at all of these pieces and see how they fit together.
Yeah, absolutely. And having been in the health and wellness space for quite some time, and then, if I could say, growing into the full body part, was that something that was intentional or something that, as you reflected upon your experiences as a younger man, where you start to say, wait a second, it's not just fitness, muscle, cardio, sleep, whatever, that there's more and more to it? Or was that something that was more immediate and acute through your healing journey as you were recovering from the disorder?
It's a wonderful question. I say is a little bit of both,
Okay.
right? There is no question that, younger Jeff, right? Like I was very much caught up in the gym mentality. I want to build muscle. I want to lift heavy. I want to run fast, right? Like, I have a personal training certification. I spend a lot of time in the gym working with people, right? And it was very much about, okay, what are the right ratios of protein and carbohydrates and macros, right? It's like, performance, athleticism. And there's a tremendous amount to be gained from that, right? I don't want to discount that, right? And it's so like sports performance and fitness training is a wonderful thing. Yet at the same time, I recognized there was something deeper and more important. And I remember this moment in my healing journey, actually, where I was asked to draw like what does a healthy version of Jeff look like, and I remember drawing this image of like it was a person, and it was a what we consider to be probably a fit muscular guy, but he had no head. It was just a body without a head. And for me that and in the middle, I drew a big heart, right? And for me, that was representative of the ways in which, we often get stuck in this mind over body mentality where it's like our head job is to dictate to our body, you need to eat this, you need to move this way, you can't do this, you have to do that, right? And it sets up this relationship, right, where our mind is now controlling our body. And I recognize that, that is what ultimately led me to this place of disordered eating, right? Because that got so extreme where the little voice in my head became this tyrant, right?
Yeah,
And sometimes people refer to it as like the food police or the food fascist or like whatever it is. It can spiral and it can dissociate and then dominate,
yeah,
right? And so that clued me into like, wait a second, this is actually a bi-directional relationship here, right? My need to listen to my body. My body's always giving me signals. It's always telling me things, right? And there's so much to gain. There's so much wisdom and intuition I can get if I'm paying attention,
yeah.
right? And so starting this conversation, seeing mind and body not as something antagonistic to each other, right? But as something that fundamentally are so interconnected that we can barely really even pull them apart. But it's like we need to begin to see how they can work together. All right. And so like, yeah, there is a time and a place where mind over body, sure, right? Like you're in a race and you need to finish that last mile and your body is saying stop, stop, stop. No, right? You show up and you get that little, mantra and you just do it, right? And you just push through. Right. But when that becomes the only voice in your head that's saying always push, always push, always push, all right, your body is going to fight back because it's unsustainable. Right. So we need to develop a more listening, more compassionate relationship with our bodies. And I think that's something that often tends to be hard with guys, again, especially young guys, because of mainstream fitness is very much in that sort of, grind, push, mind over body mindset. And a lot of times we don't slow down enough to listen, or that stuff is kind of relegated to more of the feminine realm, right? It's like that's the yin yoga, the like that's the that's the self care. It's like it's too feminine for me. Like I'm not gonna like I want to do the hardcore CrossFit. I'm gonna do my 10,000 burpees, like whatever it is. Uh, so again, it's not one or the other. It's both, and it's like finding that harmony that works for you.
It's so interesting you say that. Just yesterday, I was chatting with my son Leo, and he was having a bit of a laugh at my yoga practices. And I do go to a studio, but I also do yoga at home. And he says, yeah, now and again when you're doing it, I'll try and convince him to join. I get success 20% of the time or something like that. And then, but what he divulged to me in a bit of a, boys conversation was, yeah, every time you're doing it, I'll take a photograph and I'll send it to my pal and say, yeah, there's my dad doing his things again, And I'm saying, right, okay, so on one hand, that's funny. Okay. But on the other hand, why is that funny? Like there is nothing wrong with doing yoga at all. There is zero harm you're ever doing, and the only thing that you get is benefit from doing yoga, from slowing down, from doing any meditative practice that incorporates physical activity at the same time. And he's not quite at that stage yet where he's kind of going, huh, tell me more about that. He's just at the stage of, and I think it might be a feminine thing. I'm not actually sure. We didn't get to that part of the conversation, but he has this thing. He is a gym guy. He is, he's looking not so much to bulk, but just to make sure that he contains, that he looks as good as he can possibly look. He's at the 15-year-old age that, right now where he's going through probably a lot of the same thought patterns that everyone does at that age. And that he just has this, things are very clearly defined in buckets for him. That's cool. That's not cool. That's for real men. That's not for like it's things like that. It's not his language. I'm using my words for that sort of thing. But interesting that it gives me food for thought to kind of go back and talk to him tonight and say, explain a bit more about that. Tell me why you think that. Because of what he's
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that example with your son, as well as your approach of going in and not trying to convince him that he needs to do yoga, but simply to be curious and ask him, tell me a little bit more. I think that's beautiful, right? And of course, it's developmentally appropriate for him at that age, right? It's like so much of your world is about your social environment,
Yes.
about what your peers are doing, right? How do you fit in or not fit in? Um, and so that, and it's like, what are the other guys doing, right? Are they doing yoga or they're not, right? If all of his friends are doing yoga, I bet he'd be doing
He's
it too,
doing yoga, exactly.
right? But if that's not seen as cool, right? And so, yeah, I think there is, as back to your initial question of like, there's a developmental journey. Some of it has to do with age, some of it has to do with this sort of masculine, feminine polarities. Some of it just has to do with our body's capacity, right? Like I remember when I was a teenager or in my 20s, right? Most of the, when you're younger, you can get away with a lot of intensity,
Yeah.
right? It's like you can push hard day after day and your body will just recover. But then, as you start to get older, that's not true anymore, right? Like your body is gonna force you to slow down. You're gonna start to recognize, oh, I need more recovery time. I need something more gentle to balance these other times where
Yeah.
I'm really pushing hard.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of a paradigm that I learned from Paul Chek, who's an amazing coach in holistic health, teacher. He talks about working out is what we typically think about, right? It's energetically expensive, right? It's fiery, like it's fast, right? It's the lifting heavy, the running fast, the jumping far. It's like that's the yang part of it, but like that's when we also need to work in, and
Yes.
that's the part we don't usually pay attention to. Again, especially as guys, like we love to working out, but working in, what the hell does that mean,
Yeah.
right? Right, and that can mean lots of things, right? It can mean something like yoga, it can mean something like stretching, it can mean something like some sort of more gentle breath work, right? But it's like something that allows you to be in your body with your body in a way where it's like, yeah, you're moving energy around, you're feeling what's tight, what's tired, right? You're helping facilitate that recovery, but you're not pushing things to the edge, right? You're not always trying to take things to that final rep or failure.
Yeah.
Right, and that takes time to develop that.
Yeah, for sure it does. Absolutely. So with your background in both Buddhism and mind and brain education, I'd like firstly to know a wee bit more about the path of Buddhism. First and foremost, you mentioned earlier having a pressure, whether it was imposed or self-imposed, of doing well in school and giving yourself options and opportunity as you go forward. So I'm interested in why Buddhism was the first major thing. But after that, how do you integrate specific scientific insights and traditional wisdom into your approach to wellness, both for yourself and for your clients?
Yeah. I kind of just fell into Buddhism. It kind of landed in my lap in college. I was interested in meditation. I remember walking around campus and seeing a flyer. It was like, come learn to meditate. It was like workshop tomorrow. I was like, okay. I show up in this dark room and there's just a lady sitting there and she just kind of motions, tells us to sit down on a cushion. There was maybe like five, six other people. I sit. She lights a candle in the middle of the room and that was it. We sat there for like an hour
Yeah,
in silence, and then at the end, she kind of gave a little talk about, a little Dharma talk about some of her philosophy. But that kind of hooked me in. I was really interested, like what is an enlightened state of consciousness? What does that what does that look like? What does that feel like? You know? Um, and then at that time, that was a little bit earlier on, and then now there's such a growing sort of mindfulness movement in the United States and North America that has been brought over because Buddhism offers this timeless wisdom,
yeah,
right, on things like interdependence, right, and how connected we all are, uh, and that meditation can be so helpful for self-awareness but also for emotional regulation, right, and we're understanding the relationship between that and neuroplasticity, right, creating space for making intentional choices or rewiring old patterns.
yeah,
And then parts on non-judgmental awareness, right? That it's so key to develop this more witnessing or observing mindset to be able to not believe every single thought that shows up in your head,
yeah,
or at least not act upon it, right, so immediately, so impulsively, creating that space, right, and that has been tremendously helpful for me personally, right, and I think for everybody that I work with, right, can gain something, and for now I've just sort of woven it into my life in a way that involves some sort of formal meditation where I will sit and do my practice, but also more informal types of mindfulness. And I find that if I go days or weeks without doing that, I really start to feel a little bit more reactive, start to feel a little bit more untethered, right? I know I'm not really my best self. I know I'm not really living into this potential that I have. And so I really think of meditation as just like it just really turbocharges whatever changes you're trying to make in your life, whatever sort of personal growth you want to have. If you develop some sort of mindfulness or meditation practice, it's just going to turbocharge that.
yeah, absolutely. And I loved what you said there in terms of if you stray or, stop or whatever the routine would be, you're getting information. You start to stop feeling a bit more like yourself. You are more irritable, you're more judgy, whatever it looks like. And that information is there. Sometimes we act upon the information, sometimes we listen to it and do something with it, sometimes we don't. And I loved what you said earlier, just in terms of judging. It reminded me of my very early stages of my coaching training that I did back in 2021, I think it was. And basically the first thing I remember, it wasn't the first thing they said, but the first thing I remember was, coaches don't judge. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, that's the only thing I do consistently well in my life is just judging, is judging everything and anything, like rubbish, great, you're good, you're okay, no, I don't like that, and things. And then the more I spent time genuinely absorbing that practice and that way of being and state of being, it was so freeing. Jeff, it was one of these ones where I thought the amount of time that I've been sitting genuinely judging, whether it was just casting aspersions or opinions or, wanted or unwanted from various modes of information, the more I was just wasting my time and I wasn't seeing as much as I could see. Now, a lot of the judgments I made were correct, but that doesn't matter. It wasn't giving me the opportunity for more expansive thinking, I think, so it's very, very interesting that we take that
Yeah.
forward. So one of the
The
things,
just on that point real quick, right? I think
yeah,
the one thing that I try to bring to my coaching, right? Because I find that it's so hard, especially again for men, is this developing that voice of self-compassion, right?
Yes.
Having this ability to, compassionately self-reflect,
Yeah.
right? Which is, and as opposed to that inner critic, that inner judge, right? That just shows up day after day, moment after moment, right? To kick you in the ass, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, sometimes it's projected outward, like, all right, you're a jerk, you're an idiot, this is stupid. But a lot of times we just project it inward, right? And it's like, oh, I'm a jerk, I'm an idiot, F me. Why'd
Yeah.
I do that? Right. And it's like when we start to slow down and pay attention to that inner narrative, that little self talk that's going on in our head, and we realize, holy crap, all day I'm just beating myself up, right? For I did this wrong and I did this wrong and I did this wrong. It really starts to wear you down. It's going to wear down your energy. It's going to wear down your confidence, wear down your motivation. Um, right. And so it's like bringing that, again, similar to the working out and working in. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of that inner critic. And actually, I don't want to get rid of it. There are times, right, where actually, that little bit of kick in the pants is helpful. Where it's like, yeah, you know what, Jeff, you were an idiot. Like you acted like a dumbass and you shouldn't have done that. Come on, man. I know you're better than that, right? But if I don't want that to be the only voice, right? I need that self-compassionate voice too to be like, okay, man, we screwed up, but like we can do better. It's all good. We're working on it, right? And so like when you have these two voices now, right, things can be in harmony and in balance, right? It's like this is this philosophy again coming from a lot of Eastern spiritual traditions, right, about balance and harmony as opposed to just like again always intensity working out, always inner critic judging. Well, we need to work in, we need self-compassion. These things are all is like what's going to help us be more whole and more healthy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think giving yourself that opportunity to forgive yourself, micro forgiveness and sometimes macro forgiveness, depending on what it is. I was teaching a class recently, and I can't even remember why we got onto the topic, but the topic was about mistakes. And it's an undergraduate class, so probably late teens to early 20s. There was a couple of mid-20s folks in the class. And and I said, right, okay, we were talking about, how it was essentially how do you forgive yourself for something that you did? And I didn't get the example of what it was, and it kind of doesn't matter. I says, okay, list down in two columns, if you like, a list of the mistakes that you've made that are literally unforgivable. You will never forgive yourself for it. Someone else will never forgive you for it. Whatever that looks like. And then another column, list down the ones that are forgivable and do that. And it was basically a hypothetical exercise because I wasn't truly asking them to do it, but just to reflect on it to say, I did say something mean over text and I didn't mean it, or it was received differently and then I reacted differently because I was offended or embarrassed, whatever it was. But it was basically not to downplay actions or reactions to actions, but just to say, get a little bit of perspective here.
Mm.
We're all doing the very best we can with what we have at every given point in time. If sometimes our standards dip or slip, that's what happens as a human being. Congratulations, you're part of the human race, and try and use that to get better as you move forward. Don't park it, don't push it down, don't pretend it never happened. Address it, acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on. And it seemed to
I'm
land.
curious, did anybody put anything in that unforgivable, totally unforgivable category?
Well, as I say, it was kind of hypothetical, but at
Mm.
that point, what you seen, it was a virtual class, and what you seen was people leaning in, and then some people kind of doing, that it felt very reflective where they're saying, in the grand scheme of things, actually, I'm just a little bit embarrassed. I'm just a little bit humiliated. I'm a bit sheepish about how I acted in that particular moment. But just to give them that seed of a conversation, an internal conversation starter, that they can
Mhm.
say, right, you're going to get that kick in the arse, as you said earlier, when you deserve it. But, don't overdo it. Just use what you need to use from that situation. Make sure you make some accommodations to ensure that doesn't happen again, and then move forward with purpose and intention to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again, if at all possible. So what actually I did notice after that was that the correspondence from the students got a wee bit more, you know, um, prevalent, where there was a wee bit more comfort about asking questions and saying, I'm faced with this situation. What do you think you should do? Sometimes it warranted a Zoom call, and other times it was an email back to say you're on the right track, keep doing what you're doing, and things like that. So it was almost like unlocking a little bit of the self or subconscious to say you're absolutely where you should be right now. You're doing great. So don't let that be a distraction. Don't let that be what you remember about fall 2024 or Christmas 2025 or, Easter 2026. Just give yourself that opportunity to be a human.
Yeah, I love that. As an educator and teacher myself, Gary, I would love to be in your class. I feel like you're doing great work helping create a space where people can show up and give them permission to be human,
Yeah,
right? Which means we make mistakes. We're not perfect,
yeah,
right? Look, I teach it at Harvard. There is so much pressure there, both internally and externally, to perform, right? But one of the first things I say is like, you know, what if you have nothing to prove? Right. I want you to come in here and don't and feel like you have nothing to prove. You don't have to look smart. You don't have to sound smart. You don't have to say the absolute right best answer that everybody thinks is make you a genius. Right. Like, because that creates this fake place, right? Where it's like everyone's marrying this performative mask, right? And
yes,
that's not what, I'm here to help teach mindfulness and meditation and self-care and all of these other things, right? That are so important. Because our society at large typically doesn't create a lot of spaces where those things are welcome.
yeah.
And so, thank you for the work that you're doing.
No, thank you for saying that. So, back to you. You quote, and I absolutely love this, and I think it's something that should be on every person's wall in the entire world. Asking for help is not giving up; it's growing up. Asking for help is not giving up; it's growing up. So, how has this philosophy helped you in the social support that I mentioned earlier, in your bio, in the social support aspect of your practice?
Yeah. Look, I think there's sort of the old, kind of trite saying now that, right, like men are terrible at asking for help, right? It's like we never want to ask for directions. Like, we'll sit there and we'll bang on the thing and we'll break it and we'll struggle. And it's like, right, and because we are, it's too embarrassing, right? We don't want to lose our pride because underneath asking for help is this admittance that, like, I don't know, or I don't have the intelligence or the strength to do it. And then that appears as weak. If there's one thing that pretty much men always try to avoid, it's appearing weak, right? Especially in front of other men or in front of their partners or women, right? And that creates this real barrier. So I really want to break that stigma for men, right? That asking for help, that seeking for support, is actually one of the most important things you can do if you want to be healthier, if you want to have a more balanced life, right? And I think this is about this. We tend to think of vulnerability again as sort of this feminine thing, and we tend to think of it as the opposite of strength, right? What I'm saying, no, like actually, they're not in opposition, right? You can be vulnerable and strong. And in some ways, when you realize that you can't do it on your own and you ask someone for help, that is an act of strength.
Definitely.
That's an act of courage. That's an act of maturity. And that can, because, we're not meant to go on this journey alone. And there's a lot of things that we can't do on our own. I often say, I'm like, hey, man, like, whatever you're struggling with, like, if you could figure it out on your own, you probably would have by now. Right? The reason that you're still struggling with this month after month, year after year is that it's like you've reached the limitations of what you can do on your own. We need someone,
Yeah,
right? And something I try to teach, my son, right? I often say it's like, ask for what you want, but don't demand it.
yeah,
I think it's really healthy to be able to ask for what you want in a clear, polite way, right? But we can't demand it of other people,
yeah.
right? And a true ask means that the other person on the other end can always say no,
Yes.
right? If they can't say no, it's not a real ask, right? Then it's passive aggressive. You're trying to, right? So I think it comes back to just sort of clear communication, knowing what do you need, right? Being able to express that, and these things are like they're kind of obvious and basic, yet they become really hard to do. Right. And I
Yes.
wouldn't like, I'm not great at doing them all the time. Like there's certainly times where it's like I'm fumbling around and like my wife sees me struggling and she's like, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, "Nah, nah, I got this." Right. Right. When I would be so much better off to be like, you know what? Yeah, I'd love your help. All right. Let's do this together. Right. But I have to put down my pride, I have to put down my ego, right? And let that help in.
Yeah, exactly. And in the coaching space, I see that a lot where the many times clients will come to me after doing a version of exactly what you said there. They've struggled and struggled and struggled. They've refuted help. They've in some way thought this is good enough. They've plugged away, and then eventually got to a spot where they're thinking, I can't, like, what am I doing? I can't do this anymore. This is not working. And I very politely and subtly say, we should have been chatting 18 months ago. You realize that, and they're kind of like, yep, I do. So, but the fact that they're there and they're even saying, I don't really know what coaching is. Tell me a little bit more about it. I don't know if I have the time, the usual, the usual objections that people would put in place. That I'm saying the very first thing I say, almost the very first thing, apart from hello and how are you and such, is, thank you very much for showing up for yourself. Thank you very much for
Mm,
taking affirmative action
yeah.
for you. You deserve it.
Yep.
It's a very brave thing to do, and not everyone is doing that. And I hope that you get what you need here. And then moving forward, and whether it's male or female, I mean the exact same thing because it is. I don't even know if it's a stigma. It's almost like a very bad human habit that in some way has just been created through life in some way where I don't really want to bother anyone. I don't really, I should be able to figure this out on my own. And what are people going to think about me and all the social potential connotations that come with it. But you've came here. My line is I help people get better at things they care about. And when I put it like that, people are kind of like, well, I do care about my job. I do care about my family. I do care about my relationship. I do care about my health. I do care about my fitness, whatever it is they're looking to get better at. And it's trying to basically change the narrative slightly to get to the same spot with them feeling in a way that it's normal, which it is, and it's okay. And it's actually very, very progressive and very growth oriented and very, very impactful for your own life and the life of your community as well.
Mm, yeah. And I think you're raising a good point, and I would love to see some research around, the cultural and linguistic influences on asking for help, because I imagine they're quite strong,
Yeah.
right? And I had to, if I had to hypothesize, right, that like Western society, because it's so individualistic, right, it's sort of implicit from throughout everything that we do for hundreds of years, right? That it's like, you figure this out on your own, like be your own person, right? It's like this is like grow into, yourself as an individual, which means that asking for help in many ways is counter to that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether that would be true in more of a collectivist society. So definitely something to dig into.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating stuff. So you do emphasize a whole person approach to wellness. Can you elaborate on how systems thinking comes in and plays a role in holistic health?
Yeah. Uh, So I say there's probably three main ways in which systems thinking plays a role here. One is seeing the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
Because often in the health and wellness world, when people show up, they show up because they're experiencing some symptom, right? There's some pain point,
Yeah.
right? And our kind of Western medical model is very good at treating symptoms, right? It's like there's one pill for every ill, take this, put a band-aid on it, symptom goes away, okay, you must be healthy again. Well, what actually is the root cause of that symptom,
Yeah.
right? Can we look at that instead of treating these things in isolation, right? Can we see this bigger picture, right, of how, for example, poor eating habits, right, often stem from stress, from a lack of sleep, from unresolved emotional needs. So instead of just saying, oh, you need to change the way you eat, now we need to see how that eating is connected to all these other pieces that as we said in the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's one part of it. The second thing, kind of building upon that, is this interconnectedness of our inner world and our outer world. right? And it's like this is part of, my coaching philosophy is like, yeah, we need the outer pillars, right? We need to get the movement, the diet, the sleep, all of these things, right? The right structures in place. Like, do you have a workout, that you like? Do you have some sort of movement practice that you can do that makes you happy, that you enjoy, right? Do you have a good sleep hygiene and schedule, right? Like, do you understand basic nutrition principles? Where's your food coming from? Grocery shopping, meal prepping, these sort of things. Like there's systems and structures that just make health easier. And at the same time, though, we need to deal with the inner part, right? The emotions, the relationship, the spiritual health, right? Like what's going on internally. We talked about that little voice of judgment in your head that's beating you up, right? This feeling of, oh, I need to be a strong guy. I can't ask for help. I got to muscle through this, even if I'm in pain, even if my body hurts, even if I know I'm going to screw it up, right? So it's like we need to think about how these inner and outer pieces are working. And then the last piece is really what comes out of that is adaptive solutions,
Hmm.
right? When we take this lens of system thinking, we can, instead of just trying to like deal with this one isolated symptom, which usually, right, it's like, imagine it's like a big balloon,
Yeah.
right? And you say, oh, there's this little part of the balloon over here, I don't like it, so you like push it back in. What happens to the other part of the balloon? Right? It pops out on the other side. And you're like, oh, I don't like that. I push it back in. Poof, right? What happens to the other part of the balloon? Pops out on the other side. So you just end up, you're right. You solve one problem over here, you create another problem over here. You solve the problem over here, guess what? You've created five more problems over there. And we just start jumping around saying, oh, never feels right. Right. So when we zoom out, when we see how everything is connected, all right, then we can create these more adaptive solutions, which embrace flexibility, which helps us see that, a lot of these are not problems to solve, but they're different drives and polarities that we just need to manage, right? There isn't one ultimate final solution. That's called death. Right? It's like if you want to be alive, that means there's always going to be part of you that, that probably just wants to sit on the couch and sleep, and another part of you that wants to go for a walk, and another part of you wants to, right? So it's like we need to deal with all of these multiple urges. We need to see them in this dynamic way. That's the only way. But we need to think of it as this connected system.
Yeah, definitely. That speaks so much to me. My prior career was in project management and latterly specifically IT project management. And the number of times that you're trying to implement a new system or upgrade an existing system that has connectivity to so many other systems, and there's a essentially a lack of knowledge about what that these integration points should look like, what the behavior should be if certain language is sent in a certain format to a system that it's not expecting and such. And then you have these troubleshooting incidents where you have a war room with a number of very smart IT professionals trying to figure out where is the breakage? Where did it break down? Everything was going well in testing, and then something broke. Put that in the human context, in terms of introducing medicine, say, for example, or introducing a new sleep pattern, a new regime of something, and that's one of the things that I keep talking about with clients and certainly with family and friends, is there's very few things in your life that if you take a single action, you will see and feel a monumental difference immediately. Even if you say, for example, stop drinking, stop smoking, stop taking drugs, there's going to be a period of time that's going to be very uncomfortable. There's going to be a different part of your healing journey to get to the spot where eventually you will feel the benefits of that at some point down the road, and it's going to be different for every single person depending on how they embrace it and how they go about it. So if you decide I'm going to get 8 hours of sleep each night, and then you wake up in the morning of the first morning you feel sluggish, there's probably a propensity for some types and styles of people to say, well, that was a waste of time. That didn't work. I had the same
Yeah.
experience. I started taking vitamins about 6 months ago because my doctor says you should take vitamins. And I'm like, why? He says they're good for you. And I said, okay. So I went to a supplement store and said, listen, this is what I have to get. And okay. So then the very first day I took them, I don't feel any different. I don't feel any different. And it was a joke, because I knew I wasn't going to feel any different, but to kind of exacerbate or emphasize the point. So having that, you're going to make that tweak to this system, which might incapacitate another system. It's trial and error. It's listening to the evidence that you have. It's making sure you know why you're doing it in the first place, that you're going to have that patience and perseverance when things don't go exactly the way that you want. Your journey is not going to be a perfectly straight line. Human beings draw perfectly straight lines. Human beings don't live perfectly straight lines, you know? So it's one of those trying to get not overwhelm people with the information about the systems and the impacts from the system thinking, but just to have an awareness to say it's more complicated than you think, but there are ways to be able to do what you need to do to get to where you need to get to.
Yeah. And the piece that I want to pull out, that I love that you use the phrase healing journey, because I think that that's so important. Yet often, right, when we're in the health, fitness, wellness space, talking to guys, right, it's like, healing journey. What do you mean healing journey, right? Like, like I'm here to get strong, right? I'm, yeah, fitness journey, right? Muscle journey, weight loss journey, maybe, but healing journey, what's that, right? But like, I think it's a really important piece. Um, and it's not to say that like we're all broken and our job is to like fix ourselves. I think this also points to a very, very important paradigm shift, right? That is part of the Western psychology of like, oh, you gave the example with the vitamin, right? We tend to think of like, oh, I'm going to take this vitamin or I'm going to take this supplement, right? And it's going to make me healthy. Like, no, that's not how it works, actually, right? Actually, what we're doing is like we're helping give our body the resources it needs. Our body is the one doing all the work. Our body is the thing that is actually getting healthier, repairing, healing, right? It's not the vitamin. The vitamin's not doing it,
Yeah.
right? The vitamin's just helping give our body the things that it needs so it can do what it already knows how to do well,
Yeah.
which is grow and heal and recover, right? And so we need to shift that thinking around, right? And everybody heals at a different rate. Right. And that goes back to what you were saying of like, your journey is going to be different. It's not going to be linear. It's going to be non-linear and bumpy. And it's just planting that seed, just knowing that that's true. It's hard. It's hard to embrace that. Believe me. Right. It's like when you're going out, when you're quote unquote doing all the right things, you're like, hey man, like I've been sleeping well and eating well and exercising regularly. Right. And I still don't, I haven't seen, my body doesn't look any different. Right. And, I say it's just like, just keep going, right? Just like, you know, hold the course,
Yeah.
right? Because if you look out at the natural world, right, we see these non-linearities in so many ways, right? And I often give one example of water, right? It's like, water, right? It's like you cool it down from 50 degrees to 40 degrees. It looks the same, feels the same, nothing happens, right? And then you cool it from 40 degrees to 35 degrees. It looks the same, feels the same, nothing happens. You're like, wait a second, I'm putting all this work in to cool this water. It takes a lot of energy and effort. Why is nothing happening, right? But then all of a sudden you hit that point, right? 0 Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And all of a sudden, massive change, right? The water now, instead of being liquid, turns into a solid. You're like, whoa, what just happened? Right. And there are these tipping points, there are these thresholds. This kind of goes back to the systems thinking in our body as well. And when we zoom out in our lifestyle as well. So it's like these little pieces at first might not seem to do much, but over time, they really can make big changes. And I agree. A lot of people kind of give up too early because they're not getting those immediate results, right? And it's hard. We live in an on-demand world, right? It's like I want my Netflix show now. I want my deliveries yesterday, right? Like where is my food? It's taking more than 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we all need to slow down and take a breath.
Yeah, I completely agree. On your website, you quoted, and I love this: lifestyle is medicine, food is medicine, sleep and social support are medicine. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. There's so much to say about that piece, right? And there is now a growing movement of kind of what we would call lifestyle medicine, which very much, tries to step back from the kind of traditional biomedical model, right? Which again, we sort of focuses or overemphasizes maybe pharmaceutical solutions while neglecting this foundational role that lifestyle plays in preventing and often can be even reversing chronic disease like diabetes or other things, right? So much can be done by just changing how you sleep, changing how you eat, right? Changing, you get the social interactions, the type of people that you're with that are then going to influence those sleeping and eating habits,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And so, something that has been huge for me, right? It's like a lot of guys, again, we start this journey and they're like, hey, right? It's like, I need a workout plan, I need a nutrition plan. Like, yeah, like, again, nutrition, exercise, sleep, those are important. But equally as important is stress. How are you managing it, right? I work with a lot of guys, really like high pressure, stressful jobs, right? If you're a family man, you got kids, right? You work your ass off all day. You're trying to come home, you're trying to be a good dad, right? It's like there's so many pressures. So it makes sense at the end of the day, right? All of that stress needs to go somewhere,
Yeah.
right? Your body, and where does it often go? Into these mindless habits to make
Yeah.
ourselves feel better. And for so many guys, that's just eating and drinking,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, how do you manage stress, right? Both during the day, at the end of the day, that's so important, right? Are your social relationships, right? Are they meaningful, right? A lot of, and this, is something else talked about, sort of the epidemic of loneliness or social disconnection. I think it's something maybe a lot of us are feeling just because of how, the technology has kind of pulled us into these online disembodied worlds, or how connections are now just like status updates and text messages. We've lost a lot of face to face. And again, a lot of guys, I think, our society isn't very good about helping adult men maintain really quality, lasting friendships. And I've seen a lot of guys, it's like they get sucked into their work, they get sucked into their families, their social circles get really small, they lose touch with people. And it's not out of lack of desire. It's like not they're doing anything wrong. It's just like these things kind of fade to the background because they're not prioritized socially.
Yeah.
And yet, we know there's so much data to show that the quality of our relationships really is the number one, is the most important thing impacting our quality of life.
Yeah.
Right. And so the more meaningful, intimate, important relationships we have, the better off we're going to be, the happier we're going to be, the healthier we're going to be, because it also helps us regulate stress and hormones. It improves our immune function, enhances our longevity. It's like these things are as critical as diet and exercise. And that's why we need to pay attention to them as well.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, a lot of the work that I do just now, more so that the education I'm getting is predominantly foundationally based on ensuring that you have the right type and style of people around you, and there's certain people in your life that you can't help the fact that they're there, and but if you manage them to a certain degree that they don't have a negative impact on you, or as much of a negative impact on you as maybe they did have previously, but then being very purposeful and intentional about what you give and get from relationships, and how much that's going to impact things going forward. So I love the way that you put that. In terms of this podcast, it's called The Best You, of course, which is an opportunity to talk about things that people do that work out to be the best for them. What's one regular practice that you have that gives you the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself, Jeff?
If you're watching the video, you can see I've got a big smile on my face because I know, right? I know this. You asked this question to all your guests,
Yeah.
and this is how I'm going to answer it, Gary. Right? In the spirit of taking a holistic, systems level approach, um, I'm going to kind of like refute the question and say that there isn't one practice that enables you to become the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
Right? There is no single aspect of health that's going to change everything. Right? True wellness is about harmonizing all of these things.
Yeah.
And so I often say what ultimately the goal to build towards is to have an ecology of practices that you can turn towards,
Yeah.
right? This is sort of your wellness toolkit.
Yeah.
And depending on what sort of ailment you're facing, your situation is, you can reach into your toolkit and you've got a couple of these go-to things, right? Maybe it's a good morning ritual,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it's like, maybe that just means an hour in the morning without your phone, just to sit and, maybe you read something, right? Maybe it's some sort of daily embodiment practice, like movement thing, yoga, Maybe it's gratitude, right? I love a gratitude practice, either in a journal. I often go for gratitude walks where I try to just open my senses and just appreciate and I say thank you. I say, I see whatever I see is a little bird on the tree. I say thank you, bird, right? There's a puddle on the ground. I say thank you, rain. It's like there's a street light. I say, thank you, street light. Who made that light, right? Who operates it? Who put it there, right? Thank you for doing this, for providing, right? So it's like having an ecology of practices, right, keeps us well. Because again, it's the same way of thinking that, oh, one thing is going to change everything. It's like, no, we need many things, and we need many people too, right? And that goes back to the social support, right? It's like the more people we have surrounding us, right, and again, I'm gonna say the right people versus the wrong people. That's too binary, but we all know, right? There are certain people in your life that kind of holds you to this higher standard, maybe, right, to this accountability of you becoming the best version of you.
Yeah.
That's what a coach is about. That's why coaching is so powerful, right? Because it's literally this, right? It's like my job is to hold you accountable to become the best version of you.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm going to lift you up. I'm going to support you. I'm going to encourage you, but I'm also going to challenge you when I say, hey, it's like, was that really the best version of you? And so the more you surround yourself with those people, right, or just the people that are already doing the things that you want to be doing, right,
Yes.
the easier it is for you to, again, start those practices, those habits yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised that that was your answer. I wasn't sure if you were going to say this is one thing that I typically do every day, but that's the perfect answer for the type and style of person that you are. Wonderful. This has been a tremendous conversation, Jeff. I've absolutely loved it. I could talk about this all day. I really genuinely could because there's just so many
Likewise,
good things.
Gary, it's been a pleasure, man. I love getting to, dig into this stuff.
Yeah, me too. Before I let you go, where can people find out a little bit more about you?
Mm. Visit my website, Jeff Siegel Wellness. My name, Jeff Siegel, Siegel Wellness. Google it, visit the website. I've got a ton of resources on there. And, you know, like I say, if you're a guy and you're at that point where there's something that just isn't working in your life, that's not working at the level that you want it to be, right? Maybe a relationship to your body, a relationship to food. Um, yeah, and you're ready to see asking for help, right, as a strength as opposed to a weakness. Reach out. I'd love to chat. Right. And if I can help you, I will. And if not, I can point you in the right direction to some resources. So either way, you can come out of it with something.
Fabulous. Thanks again, Jeff. Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.